In the months that followed, Ethan and Lyra worked tirelessly to rebuild trust and strengthen ties between Earth and Zaylora. The crisis had left scars, both on their people and on their relationship, but it also created opportunities for growth. Together, they forged a new path, one that blended tradition with innovation, unity with individuality. Ethan decided to dedicate himself fully to fostering peace between the two worlds. He resigned from his job at the tech company, knowing he could no longer divide his time between ordinary life and intergalactic diplomacy. Instead, he founded an organization called the Intergalactic Alliance Initiative, IAI. Its mission was simple: to promote understanding and collaboration between Earth and alien civilizations. With Lyra's support, Ethan recruited volunteers from both planets, training them to serve as ambassadors, educators, and cultural liaisons. The II quickly gained momentum. Schools on Earth began teaching courses about Zayloran history and language, while Zaylorans learned about human art, music, and philosophy. Trade agreements flourished, bringing advanced Zayloran technology to Earth and introducing sustainable farming practices to Zaylora. Ethan became a bridge between the two cultures, using his unique perspective to solve problems and inspire change. On Zaylora, Ethan's role evolved as well. No longer seen as an outsider, he earned the respect of Lyra's council and her people. His bravery during the asteroid mission had proved his loyalty, and his efforts to improve relations solidified his place beside Lyra. Though some still questioned the legitimacy of their marriage, most came to see it as a symbol of hope. Reminder that even accidental connections could lead to meaningful partnerships. Lyra, too, underwent a transformation. Inspired by Ethan's resilience and optimism, she implemented reforms to make Zayloran governance more inclusive and transparent. She established councils where citizens could voice their concerns and participate in decision-making. She also reached out to neighboring planets, offering aid and cooperation in exchange for mutual respect. Under her leadership, Zaylora became a beacon of progress and harmony, not just for its own people, but for the entire galaxy. Despite their successes, Ethan and Lyra faced personal challenges. Living in two different worlds took its toll. Ethan missed the simplicity of his old life, the quiet evenings, spent coding or watching movies, and sometimes felt like he didn't belong anywhere. Lyra, burdened by the weight of her responsibilities, struggled to find moments of peace. But they supported each other through the hard times, reminding themselves why they had chosen this path. One evening, as they walked along the glowing streets of Zaylora's capital city, Ethan stopped to admire the view. The twin suns were setting, casting long shadows across the crystal spires. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't met?" he asked quietly. Lyra smiled. "All the time. I like to imagine we'd still be searching for something, or someone to fill the gaps in our lives. And now?" Ethan pressed. "Now," Lyra said, turning to face him, "I know exactly where I'm supposed to be." Her words warmed Ethan's heart. He realized that their journey had been about more than fixing a mistake or averting disaster. It had been about finding purpose, building bridges, and creating a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. As the years passed, Ethan and Lyra continued to work toward a brighter future. They traveled together, visiting distant planets and meeting leaders who shared their vision of unity. They also returned to Earth often, ensuring that humanity remained engaged in the galactic community. Ethan introduced Lyra to Claire, who initially struggled to wrap her head around the idea of an alien sister-in-law, but eventually warmed up to her. Max, now older and grayer, accompanied Ethan on many trips, becoming something of a mascot for the IAI. Their bond deepened with each passing day. What had started as an accidental marriage blossomed into a genuine partnership built on trust, respect, and love. Ethan marveled at how much Lyra had taught him, not just about Zayloran culture, but about courage, compassion, and the power of connection. And Lyra cherished how Ethan had opened her eyes to the beauty of imperfection, showing her that vulnerability could be a strength. Eventually, the Galactic Council formally recognized their union, declaring it a symbol of interstellar cooperation. The ceremony was grand yet intimate, attended by friends, allies, and dignitaries from across the galaxy. As Ethan stood beside Lyra, holding her hand under the shimmering stars, he felt a sense of fulfillment he had never imagined possible. Afterward, they celebrated with a feast featuring dishes from both Earth and Zaylora. Rin gave a speech praising Ethan's contributions, calling him the man who united worlds. Claire hugged Ethan tightly, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. That night, as they gazed up at the sky from the palace balcony, Ethan reflected on how far they had come. From a chance encounter at a science fiction convention to standing side by side as leaders of a new era, their story was proof that even the smallest actions could ripple outward, shaping destinies beyond imagination. "I used to dream about exploring the stars," Ethan said softly, "but I never thought I'd actually live among them." Lyra leaned her head against his shoulder. "And here you are, making history," Ethan chuckled. "Yeah, who would've thought?" They stayed there for a while, letting the silence speak for itself. The galaxy stretched endlessly above them, vast and full of possibilities. Ethan knew there would always be challenges ahead, new conflicts to resolve, new bridges to build, but he also knew they were ready to face them. For the first time in his life, Ethan felt truly alive. He had found his place in the universe, not as a passive observer, but as an active participant. And though the road had been difficult, every step had been worth it. As the stars twinkled in the distance, Ethan made a silent promise to keep pushing forward, to keep fighting for a better tomorrow. Because somewhere out there, amid the infinite expanse of space, lay countless stories waiting to unfold. And he and Lyra were just getting started. The weeks following the Galactic Council hearing were tense but productive. Ethan and Lyra threw themselves into their work, determined to prove that their bond could benefit both Earth and Zaylora. They launched new programs aimed at fostering understanding between humans and aliens, from cultural exchanges to joint scientific research projects. Ethan became a familiar face in Zayloran media, often speaking about the importance of unity and cooperation. Slowly, public opinion began to shift in their favor, but behind the scenes, trouble was brewing. The faction that had accused Ethan of manipulation hadn't given up. Instead, they grew bolder, spreading rumors and planting false evidence to discredit Lyra's leadership. One day, while reviewing reports with Rin, Ethan discovered something alarming: a document suggesting that a rival planet was planning to sabotage Zaylora's infrastructure. If successful, the attack would cripple Zaylora's economy and destabilize its government. Ethan immediately brought the information to Lyra. "We need to act fast," he said urgently. "If this happens, it'll undo everything we've worked for." Lyra studied the document carefully, her expression grim. "This goes beyond politics. Someone is trying to destroy us." Together, they devised a plan. Using Ethan's technical expertise and Rin's engineering skills, they set out to identify the source of the threat. It wasn't easy. Zaylora's advanced technology made tracking intrusions nearly impossible, but Ethan refused to give up. He spent hours poring over data, searching for patterns or anomalies that might lead them to the attackers. Finally, after days of relentless effort, they found a clue: a signal originating from a remote asteroid field near Zaylora's borders. The location was suspicious. It wasn't part of any known trade routes or inhabited areas. Ethan and Lyra decided to investigate, despite the risks. The journey to the asteroid field was perilous. Their ship, smaller and less equipped than most Zayloran vessels, had to navigate through dense clusters of space debris. Ethan sat beside Lyra in the cockpit, gripping the armrests tightly as rocks scraped against the hull. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" he asked nervously. "No," Lyra admitted, "but we don't have a choice." When they reached the coordinates, they discovered a hidden base embedded within one of the larger asteroids. Lights flickered inside, and faint hums indicated activity. Lyra signaled for silence as they docked nearby. Armed with handheld scanners and communication devices, They ventured inside. The air was cold and metallic, echoing with distant footsteps and mechanical whirring. They moved cautiously, sticking to the shadows. As they explored deeper, they uncovered evidence of sabotage plans, blueprints of Zaloran cities marked with target points, crates filled with explosives, and encrypted messages detailing the operation. Suddenly, voices echoed down the corridor. Ethan froze, his heart pounding. Grabbing Lyra's hand, he pulled her into an alcove just as a group of figures passed by. They wore uniforms bearing the insignia of a rival planet, one known for its hostility towards Zalora. "They're planning to strike tomorrow," one of the figures muttered. "By the time anyone realizes what's happening, it'll be too late." Ethan exchanged a look with Lyra. They needed to warn Zalora immediately. But as they turned to leave, another group blocked their path. Trapped, Ethan knew they had no choice but to fight. "Stay close to me," Lyra whispered, pulling a small energy weapon from her belt. Ethan followed suit, clutching the device awkwardly. He'd never been in a fight before, let alone against armed aliens. But adrenaline surged through him as the first shot rang out. The skirmish was chaotic. Blasts of light illuminated the narrow corridors as Ethan and Lyra dodged and returned fire. Ethan's aim was shaky, but he managed to disable one of their pursuers. Lyra moved with precision, her movements fluid and calculated. Together, they fought their way back to the docking bay, narrowly escaping capture. Once aboard their ship, Ethan slumped into the pilot's seat, his hands trembling. "That was insane," he gasped. "I can't believe we made it out alive." Lyra nodded, her face pale but resolute. "We did what we had to do. Now we need to get this information back to Zalora." They raced back to the planet, delivering the evidence to Lyra's council. The discovery sparked outrage among Zalorans, who demanded action against the hostile faction. With proof of the conspiracy in hand, Lyra addressed the Galactic Council once again, exposing the plot and calling for unity against those who sought to divide them. The response was overwhelming. Allies pledged support, offering resources and reinforcements to protect Zalora. Even some former critics sided with Lyra, acknowledging her leadership and determination. For the first time since the accidental marriage, Ethan felt a sense of hope. Their bond, once seen as a liability, had become a symbol of resilience. However, the victory came at a cost. During the confrontation on the asteroid, Ethan had been injured, a minor burn on his arm, but it served as a reminder of the dangers they faced. More importantly, the experience forced him to confront his own fears and limitations. He realized that being part of something greater meant taking risks, even when failure seemed inevitable. As the dust settled, Ethan found himself reflecting on how much he had changed. The shy, uncertain man who had stumbled into this intergalactic drama was gone. In his place stood someone stronger, braver, and more determined than ever to make a difference. One evening, as Ethan and Lyra stood on the palace balcony overlooking the glowing city, Lyra turned to him. "You've sacrificed so much," she said softly. "Do you regret any of it?" Ethan thought for a moment before shaking his head. "No, yeah, there are things I miss about my old life. But I wouldn't trade this for anything. You've shown me what it means to truly belong, to have a purpose bigger than myself." Lyra smiled, her eyes glistening. "And you've done the same for me. You reminded me that leadership isn't just about rules and traditions. It's about trust, courage, and standing up for what's right." They stood in silence for a while, watching the twin suns dip below the horizon. The sky turned shades of gold and purple, casting a warm glow over the city. Ethan felt a sense of peace, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. But deep down, he also knew the fight wasn't over. While the immediate threat had been neutralized, tension still simmered beneath the surface. The galaxy was vast and unpredictable, full of factions eager to exploit divisions for their own gain. Ethan understood now that maintaining peace required constant vigilance and sacrifice. Still, he was ready. ready to embrace the unknown, to protect the people he cared about, and to build a future where Earth and Zaylora could thrive side by side. As he glanced at Lyra, he realized that their accidental marriage had transformed not only their lives, but the destiny of two worlds. And maybe, just maybe, that was worth every struggle along the way. Ethan's life had settled into a rhythm, but it was a fragile one. He split his time between Earth and Zaylora, navigating the complexities of both worlds while trying to keep his secret safe. On Earth, he maintained his routine working at the tech company, chatting with coworkers, and occasionally visiting Claire. But on Zaylora, he was no longer just a visitor. He was part of Lyra's inner circle, helping her govern and represent their people. Despite the challenges, Ethan felt like he was finally finding his footing. That sense of stability shattered one morning when Lyra called him into an emergency meeting. Her advisors were gathered in the council chamber, their faces tense. Ethan could feel the weight of the situation before anyone spoke. "What's going on?" he asked as he took his seat beside Lyra. "We've received reports of unrest," Kayla began, her voice sharp. "A faction within the Galactic Council is accusing you of manipulating Lyra for personal gain." Ethan's heart sank. Manipulating her? That's ridiculous. I didn't even know she was an alien until weeks after we met. Kayla raised a hand to silence him. "The accusations don't stop there. They claim your marriage threatens universal peace by giving Earth undue influence over Zaylora." Lyra leaned forward, her expression fierce. "This is political maneuvering. Certain factions see our bond as an opportunity to weaken my rule." Ethan looked at her, feeling a mix of anger and helplessness. "So what do we do? How do we prove them wrong?" One of the advisors, a tall Zayloran named Varric, spoke up. "We must act quickly. If these accusations spread, they could escalate into conflict, not just between Earth and Zaylora, but across the galaxy." Ethan swallowed hard. The stakes were higher than he'd realized. He thought back to the strange occurrences on Earth, the mysterious sightings of spacecraft, the sudden interest in his personal life. Had someone been watching him this whole time? Was he being used as a pawn in a larger game? Lyra placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "We'll get through this together. First, we need to gather evidence to counter their claims. Then, we'll present our case to the Galactic Council." Over the next few days, Ethan threw himself into the task. With Rin's help, he reviewed surveillance data from Zayloran ships monitoring Earth. They discovered patterns suggesting that rival factions had been deliberately spreading misinformation to stir up fear. Ethan also worked with Lyra's team to draft a detailed report explaining how their marriage was accidental and purely symbolic. It wasn't easy. Every word had to be carefully chosen to avoid offending anyone, but they managed to create a compelling argument. Meanwhile, tensions on Earth continued to rise. Ethan noticed strangers lingering near his apartment building, taking photos of him as he came and went. One night, he returned home to find his door slightly ajar. Inside, drawers were pulled open and papers were scattered across the floor. Someone had broken in. Max darted out from under the bed, clearly shaken. Ethan checked the damage but found nothing missing, except for confidential files related to his work on Zaylora. Panic bubbled in his chest. Whoever was behind this knew too much. He called Lyra immediately, describing the break-in. "It's worse than we thought," she said grimly. "They're targeting you directly. You're not safe on Earth anymore. What am I supposed to do?" Ethan asked, his voice trembling. "I can't just leave everything behind." "You may have to," Lyra replied. "At least until we resolve this crisis." Reluctantly, Ethan agreed. He packed a bag, left a vague voicemail for his boss, and boarded a Zayloran ship bound for safety. As the vessel soared into space, Ethan stared out the window at Earth, growing smaller below. He felt a pang of sadness, knowing he might never return to the life he once knew. On Zaylora, Ethan stayed close to the palace, avoiding public appearances to minimize risk. Lyra assigned guards to protect him, though she assured him they were, taking every precaution to keep the situation contained. Together, they prepared for the upcoming hearing before the Galactic Council. The day of the hearing arrived, and Ethan felt a knot of anxiety tighten in his stomach. The council chamber was enormous, its walls adorned with glowing symbols that pulsed softly. Rows of dignitaries from various planets filled the seats, their eyes fixed on Ethan and Lyra as they entered. Some looked curious, others hostile. When it was their turn to speak, Lyra stepped forward, her presence commanding. She addressed the council calmly, presenting their case with precision. "Our union was unintentional," she stated firmly. "But it has become an opportunity, a chance to strengthen ties between Earth and Zaylora. To accuse us of manipulation is baseless and dangerous." Next, it was Ethan's turn. He stood up, feeling all eyes on him. His palms were sweaty and his heart raced, but he reminded himself why he was here. Taking a deep breath, he began to speak. "I didn't ask for this," he said, his voice steady despite his nerves. "But since it happened, I've tried to make the best of it. I've learned about Zaylora's culture, helped bridge gaps between our worlds, and worked alongside Lyra to promote peace. Accusing me of ulterior motives is unfair and untrue." The room fell silent as Ethan finished. For a moment, he feared he hadn't done enough. Then, a representative from a neighboring planet stood up. "His words ring true," the alien said. "Perhaps instead of focusing on blame, we should consider the potential benefits of this alliance." Others nodded in agreement, and slowly the tide began to shift. By the end of the session, the council decided to table the accusations, pending further investigation. While the threat wasn't completely gone, Ethan and Lyra had bought themselves some time. Afterward, Lyra hugged Ethan tightly. "You did well," she whispered. "Better than I could have hoped." Ethan smiled weakly, still processing everything that had happened. "Let's hope it's enough." In the weeks that followed, Ethan and Lyra worked tirelessly to solidify their position. They launched initiatives aimed at fostering goodwill between Earth and Zaylora, such as sharing medical technology and offering educational exchanges. Ethan became a key figure in these efforts, using his knowledge of both worlds to build trust. Despite the progress, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that danger lurked around every corner. He started carrying a small device Rin had given him, gadget designed to detect surveillance. It buzzed faintly whenever someone was nearby, giving him a sense of security. Still, sleep eluded him most nights. Every shadow seemed suspicious, every sound ominous. One evening, as Ethan walked through the palace gardens, Lyra joined him. "You're carrying a lot of weight," she observed gently. "Are you okay?" Ethan hesitated, unsure how to answer. "I'm just tired," he admitted. "Tired of looking over my shoulder, tired of wondering if I'll ever feel safe again." Lyra squeezed his hand. "I wish I could promise you that things will get easier. But I can promise you this, you're not alone. We'll face whatever comes next together." Her words brought a small measure of comfort. Ethan realized that while his old life was gone, he had gained something far greater, a purpose, a partner, and a place where he truly belonged, even if it was among the stars. Ethan's life had become a balancing act between two worlds. On Earth, he tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy, keeping his job at the tech company and spending weekends tinkering with personal projects. To his co-workers and neighbors, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. They didn't know that every few weeks, Ethan disappeared to another planet, where he was treated like royalty, or at least someone close to it. Living on Zaylora wasn't easy, but Ethan was starting to adapt. He learned how to navigate the crystal cities, memorizing pathways that shimmered faintly underfoot. The food took some getting used to. Most meals were liquid base, served in glowing bowls, but he found a few dishes he actually enjoyed. Even the language, which had once sounded like a symphony of strange tones, began to make sense after hours of practice. Still, the hardest part was managing the expectations of Lyra's people. As her consort, Ethan was expected to attend ceremonies, give speeches, and represent Zaylora alongside Lyra. At first, he stumbled through these events, unsure of what to say or do. But over time, he grew more confident. He started picking up on subtle cues from Lyra and her advisors, learning when to speak and when to stay silent. His humor, often dry and self-deprecating, even won over some skeptics. Back on Earth, however, things were trickier. Ethan couldn't tell anyone about Zaylora, not his boss, not his friends, not even his family. How could he explain that he was accidentally married to an alien monarch? Instead, he made up excuses for his absences, conferences, research trips, family emergencies. It was exhausting, constantly juggling lies while trying to keep his real life intact. One Saturday afternoon, Ethan decided to visit his younger sister Claire, who lived in a nearby town. Claire was one of the few people who truly understood him, or at least she used to. Lately, their conversations had been strained. "You've changed," she said during lunch, studying him carefully. "You're distant, like your mind is somewhere else." Ethan forced a laugh. "I'm just busy with work, that's all." Claire frowned. "It's more than that. You don't talk about your life anymore." "Are you seeing someone?" The question caught Ethan off guard. For a moment, he considered telling her the truth. But how could he? "No," he replied quickly. "Just focusing on my career." Claire didn't look convinced, but she let it drop. Later that evening, as Ethan drove home, he felt a pang of guilt. He missed having someone he could confide in, someone who knew the real him. Max, his cat, greeted him at the door with a meow. But even Max couldn't fill the void. On Zaylora, Ethan found himself opening up more to Lyra. Their bond deepened as they faced challenges together. One day, during a council meeting, an advisor named Kayla questioned Ethan's role outright. "Why should we trust a human?" she demanded. "They are primitive compared to us." Lyra stood up immediately, her voice firm. "Ethan is not primitive. He has proven himself time and again. Without him, I wouldn't have been able to bridge the gap between our cultures so effectively." Kayla glared but said nothing further. After the meeting, Ethan thanked Lyra for defending him. "You didn't have to do that," he said quietly. "Yes, I did," Lyra replied. "You're my partner, Ethan. We're in this together." Her words meant more to him than she realized. Slowly, Ethan stopped seeing himself as an outsider. He embraced his role, using his knowledge of Earth to help Jaylorans understand humanity better. He taught them about Earth's history, its art, and its struggles. In return, they shared their own stories, revealing a culture rich with wisdom and tradition. But adapting to Zayloran society came with its own set of challenges. For instance, physical touch was highly regulated on Zaylora. A simple handshake could carry layers of meaning depending on how it was performed. Ethan accidentally offended someone early on by gripping their hand too firmly. Thankfully, Lyra stepped in to smooth things over, explaining that humans weren't always aware of such nuances. Despite these hurdles, Ethan began to feel a sense of belonging. He formed friendships with several Zaylorans, including Rin, the engineer who had taken him under his wing. Together, they worked on small projects, combining human ingenuity with Zayloran technology. One invention, a device that translated emotions into visual patterns, became particularly popular among the younger generation. Meanwhile, tensions between Earth and Zaylora continued to simmer. News outlets reported sightings of unidentified spacecraft near Earth's orbit, sparking panic among the public. Governments scrambled to investigate, unaware that the ships belonged to Zayloran diplomats monitoring the situation. Ethan worried that the truth would eventually come out, leading to chaos. He urged Lyra to find a way to ease Earth's fears without revealing everything. "We need to show them we're not a threat," Ethan suggested during one of their late-night discussions. "Maybe send ambassadors to Earth, disguised as humans." Lyra nodded thoughtfully. "It's risky, but it might work. We'll have to choose carefully, though. not everyone can blend in. Over the next few months, Ethan and Lyra worked tirelessly to improve relations between their worlds. They organized cultural exchanges, sending Zayloran artifacts to museums on Earth and sharing scientific advancements that benefited both planets. Ethan acted as a mediator, ensuring that communication remained clear and respectful. Through it all, Ethan marveled at how much he had grown. The shy, reserved man who once dreamed of adventure now stood confidently beside an alien queen, helping to shape the future of two civilizations. He still missed parts of his old life, the simplicity, the anonymity, but he no longer resented the path he was on. If anything, he felt grateful for the opportunity to make a difference. One evening, as Ethan and Lyra strolled through the palace gardens, Lyra turned to him with a soft smile. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't met?" She asked. Ethan paused, thinking about it. "Probably not," he admitted. "I'd still be stuck in my little world, wishing for something more." Ethan's days became a blur of new experiences and overwhelming information. After the meeting at the estate, Lyra arranged for him to visit Zaylora. At first, Ethan resisted the idea. Traveling to another planet sounded like something out of a movie, not real life. But Lyra insisted it was necessary. "You need to understand our world if you're going to help me fix this," she said firmly. Reluctantly, Ethan agreed. The journey itself was unlike anything he had ever imagined. Lyra led him to a hidden facility outside the city, where a sleek spacecraft waited. It looked nothing like the clunky rockets Ethan had seen in documentaries. The ship was smooth and silver, with no visible engines or windows. Inside, the walls glowed softly, and the seats molded themselves to his body as he sat down. When the ship took off, there was no rumbling or shaking, just a gentle hum as they left Earth's atmosphere behind as they traveled through space. Lyra explained more about Zaylora. She described her planet as a place of beauty and harmony, with towering crystal cities and vast oceans that shimmered under twin suns. She also warned him about the challenges they would face. "My people are proud," she said. "They value tradition and order. Some of them won't be happy about our situation." Ethan nodded, though his stomach churned at the thought. He wasn't sure how he'd handle meeting an entire civilization of aliens, let alone convincing them that their accidental marriage wasn't a threat to galactic peace. Still, he tried to stay positive. If Lyra believed they could fix this, then maybe there was hope. When they arrived on Zaylora, Ethan stepped out of the ship and gasped. The landscape was breathtaking. The sky was a deep purple, streaked with golden clouds, and the air smelled faintly of flowers. In the distance, he could see the crystal spires of a city rising gracefully into the horizon. Everything seemed alive, humming with energy. Lyra guided him toward the palace, where she lived and ruled. Along the way, they passed groups of Zaylorans going about their daily lives. They were tall and elegant, with skin that shimmered like opals and eyes that glowed softly. Some wore intricate robes, while others dressed in simple tunics. Despite their otherworldly appearance, they seemed friendly enough, bowing respectfully as Lyra walked by at the palace. Ethan met Lyra's council, a group of advisors who helped her govern Zaylora. They greeted him politely, but with obvious curiosity. One of them, a woman named Kayla, studied him intently. "So this is the human?" she asked, her voice carrying a mix of fascination and skepticism. "Yes," Lyra replied. "Ethan Carter. He's here to assist us in resolving the issue." Kayla raised an eyebrow. "And what qualifications does he have for such a task?" Ethan felt his cheeks redden. He wanted to defend himself, but didn't know where to start. Fortunately, Lyra stepped in. "He may not be familiar with our ways yet, but he's intelligent and adaptable. That's exactly what we need right now." The council members exchanged glances, but said nothing further. Instead, they launched into a discussion about the next steps. They explained that dissolving the accidental marriage required approval. from the Galactic Council, a governing body that oversaw relations between planets. Until then, Ethan and Lyra were bound by Zayloran law, which meant Ethan would have to act as her consort in public. The news hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. Consort? That sounded like a fancy word for husband. He hadn't signed up for this. All he wanted was to go back to his quiet life in Ohio. But as he listened to the council's plans, he realized there was no turning back, whether he liked it or not. He was part of this now. Over the following days, Ethan struggled to adjust to his new role. Every morning, he attended meetings with Lyra and her advisors, learning about Zayloran customs and politics. He practiced speaking their language, which was filled with musical tones and subtle gestures. He even participated in ceremonial events, standing beside Lyra as she addressed crowds of ZYLOR and S. It wasn't easy. Many of Lyra's subjects viewed him with suspicion. Some whispered that he was using Lyra to gain influence over Zaylora, while others saw him as a liability, an outsider who didn't belong. Ethan did his best to ignore the criticism, focusing instead on proving himself worthy of trust. Slowly, he began earning respect not just from Lyra's advisors, but from ordinary Zaylorans as well. Through it all, Ethan grew closer to Lyra. At first, he saw her as distant and regal, someone far above his station. But as they spent more time together, he discovered her softer side. She laughed easily, especially when Ethan made clumsy mistakes during ceremonies. She confided in him about the pressures of leadership and the loneliness that came with being a monarch. In return, Ethan shared stories about his life on Earth, painting pictures of bustling cities and quiet suburban streets. One evening, as they walked through the palace gardens, Lyra turned to him. "How are you holding up?" she asked gently. Ethan shrugged. "I'm surviving. It's a lot to take in, but I'm learning." Lyra smiled. "You've done better than I expected. Most humans wouldn't adapt so quickly." "Well, I don't really have a choice, do I?" Ethan joked, though there was a hint of truth in his words. Lyra's expression softened. "No, you don't, and I'm sorry for that. But I want you to know how much I appreciate your strength. You've handled everything with grace." Her words warmed Ethan's heart. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, he felt like he was making a difference. Maybe he couldn't change the past, but he could shape the future for himself, for Lyra, and for both their worlds. As the days turned into weeks, Ethan found himself growing more comfortable on Zaylora. He started recognizing patterns in the culture, understanding the nuances of Zayloran behavior. He even made friends with a young engineer named Rin, who taught him how to repair some of the planet's advanced technology. Rin often teased Ethan about his human quirks, but their bond was genuine. Despite these small victories, Ethan knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The Galactic Council's decision loomed over them, and tensions between Earth and Zaylora continued to rise. Rumors spread that rival factions within the galaxy saw their marriage as a threat to universal balance. Ethan tried not to dwell on these fears, focusing instead on the present moment. One night, as he stood on the palace balcony overlooking the glowing city, Lyra joined him. "What are you thinking about?" she asked quietly. "The stars." Ethan replied. "Back home, I used to look at them and wonder what was out there. Now I'm living among them, and it's surreal." Lyra nodded. "Life has a way of surprising us. Sometimes those surprises lead us to places we never imagined." Ethan glanced at her, feeling a spark of gratitude. "Yeah," he said softly. "Sometimes they do." A few weeks passed, and Ethan's life seemed to settle back into its usual rhythm. He went to work, spent time with Max, and occasionally texted Lyra. Their conversations were pleasant, though she often hinted at something important without ever explaining what it was. Ethan didn't think much of it. He figured she'd tell him when she was ready. But then, one evening, he received an email from her. The subject line read, "An invitation you won't forget." Curious, Ethan opened the message. It was short and mysterious. Lyra wrote that she wanted to introduce him to some friends at a private gathering. She promised it would be an unforgettable experience and included an address outside of town. Ethan hesitated. He wasn't used to attending events like this, especially ones held in secluded locations. Still, his curiosity got the better of him. Something about Lyra made him trust her, even if she was hard to figure out. The next day, Ethan drove to the address Lyra had provided. It turned out to be a large estate surrounded by tall trees and iron gates. As he parked his car and walked toward the entrance, he noticed how quiet everything felt. There were no cars in sight, no signs of other guests. For a moment, he wondered if he'd come to the wrong place. But then, the gates swung open automatically, and a voice spoke from somewhere nearby. "Welcome, Ethan Carter. Please proceed." Ethan froze. How did they know his name? Shaking off his unease, he stepped inside. The estate was beautiful, with manicured gardens and a grand mansion at its center. A woman dressed in a sleek black suit greeted him at the door. "Miss Voss is waiting for you," she said with a polite nod, leading him through the halls. Inside, the atmosphere was strange. The lighting was dim, and the walls were adorned with symbols Ethan didn't recognize. People stood in small groups, speaking in hushed tones. They all wore formal attire, but there was something odd about them, something Ethan couldn't quite pinpoint. Some had unusually pale skin, while others moved with an almost unnatural grace. No one paid attention to him as he followed the woman deeper into the mansion. Finally, they reached a large room where Lyra stood waiting. She looked stunning, dressed in a flowing gown that shimmered faintly under the light. When she saw Ethan, her face lit up with relief. "You came," she said, walking over to greet him. "Of course I did," Ethan replied, forcing a smile. "What is this place?" Lyra glanced around nervously before taking his hand. "I need to explain something to you," she said quietly. "But first, promise me you won't panic." Ethan frowned. "Panic? Why would I?" Before he could finish, Lyra interrupted him. "Ethan, I'm not who you think I am. I'm not human." For a moment, Ethan thought he misheard her. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. Lyra took a deep breath. "I'm from a planet called Zaylora. We're part of a vast interstellar community. I came here on a diplomatic mission. But something unexpected happened." Ethan stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. "You're an alien?" he whispered, half expecting her to laugh and say it was a joke. She nodded solemnly. "Yes, and because of a ceremonial mishap during a virtual conference, we are now bound together under Zayloran law. You and I, we're married." Ethan's mind reeled. Married? To an alien? This had to be some kind of prank. But the look on Lyra's face told him she was serious. Wait, he stammered. "How does that even happen? I didn't agree to any of this." "I know," Lyra said quickly. "It was an accident, a technical error. Believe me, I didn't mean for this to happen. But Zayloran laws are strict, and once a bond is formed, it cannot be undone easily." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, feeling overwhelmed. "This is insane. What does it even mean? Am I supposed to live on your planet now? Do I have to wear robes or learn alien customs?" Lyra placed a comforting hand on his arm. "No, nothing like that. The marriage is mostly symbolic, at least. It was meant to be. Unfortunately, word has spread, and my people are already treating it as official. I've been summoned back to Zaylora to address the situation. So what happens to me?" Ethan asked, his voice rising slightly. "Do I just go back to my normal life and pretend none of this happened? I wish it were." "That's simple," Lyra admitted. "But the truth is, you're now part of intergalactic politics. If we don't handle this carefully, it could cause problems, not just for us, but for relations between Earth and Zaylora." Ethan sank into a nearby chair, his head spinning. This was too much to take in. Just a few weeks ago, he was living a boring, predictable life. Now, he was married to an alien queen or whatever Lyra was, and caught up in some cosmic drama he didn't understand. As if sensing his distress, Lyra knelt beside him. "I'm so sorry, Ethan. I never intended for any of this to happen, but I need your help. Together, we can fix this." Ethan looked at her, searching her eyes for answers. Despite everything, he believed her. She seemed genuinely sorry, and there was a vulnerability in her expression that made him want to trust her. "Okay," he said finally. "What do we do next?" Lyra smiled faintly. "First, we meet with my advisors. They'll explain more about Zayloran culture and what's expected of us. Then, we'll figure out how to resolve this diplomatically." Ethan nodded slowly, still processing the enormity of the situation. He followed Lyra to another room where several individuals waited. They introduced themselves as members of Lyra's entourage, though their names sounded like combinations of syllables Ethan couldn't pronounce. One of them, a tall man with silvery hair, stepped forward. "Mr. Carter," he said in a smooth, accented voice, "we appreciate your cooperation in this matter. Your presence will play a crucial role in maintaining peace between our worlds." Ethan managed a weak smile. "I'll do my best," he murmured, though he wasn't sure what his best even meant in this context. Over the next hour, Lyra and her advisors explained the basics of Zayloran society. They talked about their advanced technology, their commitment to diplomacy, and the importance of unity among planets. Ethan listened intently, asking questions whenever he dared. The more he learned, the more surreal the situation became. These weren't just aliens, they were highly intelligent beings, with centuries of history and knowledge far beyond anything humans possessed. By the end of the meeting, Ethan's head was spinning again, but this time with awe rather than confusion. He realized that Lyra wasn't exaggerating when she said their marriage had implications beyond just the two of them. Somehow, he had become a bridge between Earth and Zaylora, a role he hadn't asked for, but couldn't ignore as they prepared to leave the estate. Lyra turned to him. "Thank you for staying calm," she said softly. "I know this must be overwhelming." "It is," Ethan admitted. "But I get the feeling this is only the beginning." Lyra nodded. "You're right. Things are going to get more complicated before they get better, but I promise we'll face it together." Ethan sighed, glancing up at the stars visible through the mansion's windows. "Together," he repeated, though the word felt heavy on his tongue. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain: his ordinary life was gone forever. Ethan Carter lived a life that most people would describe as ordinary. He worked as a software engineer in a small tech company located in the suburbs of Ohio. Every day, he woke up at 7 in the morning, had a cup of coffee, and drove to work. His job involved fixing bugs in computer programs, which was not exciting, but paid the bills. At 32 years old, Ethan didn't have much to complain about. His apartment was clean, his cat, Max, kept him company, and he enjoyed watching old science fiction movies on weekends. But deep down, Ethan often felt like something was missing. He dreamed of adventure, of exploring unknown worlds, but those dreams stayed locked inside his head. Never seeing the light of day. One Friday evening, Ethan decided to step out of his usual routine. A friend from college had invited him to speak at a local science fiction convention. The topic was the future of artificial intelligence, something Ethan knew well enough to talk about without too much preparation. He agreed because it sounded fun and different, even though public speaking made him nervous. On the day of the event, Ethan put on his best button-up shirt, grabbed his notes, and headed to the convention center. The place was buzzing with energy. People dressed as aliens, robots, and space explorers wandered around, laughing and taking pictures. Booths selling books, toys, and handmade crafts lined the hallways. Ethan couldn't help but smile as he walked past a group of kids pretending to fly spaceships made of cardboard. For a moment, he felt like he was part of something bigger than himself, something imaginative and full of wonder. After setting up his presentation materials, Ethan took a seat near the stage. That's when he noticed her, a woman standing alone. near the refreshment table. She looked out of place, dressed in a simple yet elegant outfit that didn't match the costumes everyone else wore. Her long, dark hair framed her face perfectly, and her eyes seemed to glow with an intensity that caught Ethan's attention. He found himself staring for longer than he should have before quickly looking away. When the panel discussion began, Ethan focused on answering questions from the audience. Still, every now and then, he glanced over at the mysterious woman. After the session ended, she approached him with a polite smile. "Hi," she said softly, extending her hand. "I'm Lyra Voss." Ethan shook her hand, feeling a strange warmth in his palm. "Nice to meet you," he replied, trying to sound casual. "I'm Ethan Carter." "I enjoyed your talk," Lyra said, tilting her head slightly. "You seem very knowledgeable about technology." "Thanks," Ethan muttered, scratching the back of his neck. "It's just my job, really." Lyra nodded, her expression thoughtful. They chatted for a few minutes about artificial intelligence and its potential impact on society. Ethan noticed how carefully she listened to everything he said, as if his words carried more weight than they actually did. There was something unusual about her, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. She spoke English fluently, but occasionally used phrases that sounded formal or outdated. When Ethan asked where she was from, she hesitated before saying, "Far away." Before Ethan could ask what she meant, Lyra changed the subject. "Do you attend events like this often?" she asked, her tone light. "Not really," Ethan admitted. "This is my first time. I usually stick to my own little world." Lyra smiled faintly. "Sometimes stepping out of our comfort zones leads to unexpected discoveries." Her words lingered in Ethan's mind long after their conversation ended. Before leaving, Lyra handed him a business card with her name and contact information written neatly in bold letters. "If you ever want to discuss technology or anything else, feel free to reach out," she said warmly. Ethan thanked her and watched as she walked away, disappearing into the crowd. As he drove home that night, he thought about their brief interaction. Something about Lyra intrigued him, though he couldn't say exactly why. Maybe it was her calm demeanor, or the way she seemed both familiar and foreign at the same time. Whatever it was, Ethan decided to hold on to her card, tucking it safely into his wallet. Over the next few days, life returned to normal for Ethan. He went back to work, spent evenings coding personal projects, and occasionally played fetch with Max. But whenever he passed by his wallet, he remembered Lyra and wondered if he should call her. It wasn't until a week later, while cleaning his desk, that he finally mustered the courage to send her a text message. "Hey, it's Ethan. Just wanted to say thanks again for stopping by after the panel." To his surprise, Lyra replied almost immediately, "Hello, Ethan. It's good to hear from you. How are you?" They exchanged a few messages over the next couple of days, discussing everything from movies to futuristic gadgets. Lyra's responses were always thoughtful, sometimes veering into philosophical territory. One evening, she mentioned wanting to show him something special and suggested meeting up soon. Curiosity got the better of Ethan, and he agreed. On the day of their planned meeting, Ethan arrived at a quiet cafe downtown. Lyra was already there, sitting by the window with a cup of tea in front of her. She greeted him with a smile that made him feel oddly at ease. As they talked, Ethan realized how easy it was to open up to her. He found himself sharing stories about his childhood, his love for sci-fi novels, and even his secret desire to travel the stars someday. At one point, Lyra leaned closer, her gaze locking onto his. "Ethan," she began, her voice soft but serious, "there's something I need to tell you." For a moment, Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Was she going to confess some deep secret? Or maybe admit she had feelings for him? Instead, she paused, her lips parting as if searching for the right words. Then, shaking her head slightly, she said, "Never mind. It can wait." Though curious, Ethan didn't press her. They continued their conversation, laughing and sharing stories until the sun began to set. By the time they parted ways, Ethan felt a connection with Lyra that he hadn't felt with anyone in a long time. Little did he know, their lives were about to change in ways neither of them could have imagined.